It's time now for Charting Futures. Let's check in with Abigail Doolittle. And Abigail, which commodities are you focusing on right now?
Great question, Scarlett. We're going to be looking at gold and silver in the near term in a moment. But first, let's take a look at futures overall, commodity futures overall. Next to the S&P 500 futures, you see a little bit of divergence there. S&P 500 futures up just a little bit. The Bloomberg Commodity Index down just a little bit. Two of the biggest movers before looking at gold and silver. We have Brent crude up 1.1%. But take a look at natural gas down 3.7%. So a little bit of a tug of war. But what I'd really like to focus on is that divergence between stocks and commodities, because that's not just the case on today on a small basis. It's actually the case over the last roughly 2 years on a much bigger basis. This is January of 2018, and we see that in white, the S&P 500, and blue, the commodity futures, initially as President Trump was in office, really was going along quite well, or excuse me, not as President Trump was in office, as the trade war had started off, was correlated pretty strongly, and then stocks took off, and it's been downhill ever since for commodities. These are both risk assets. So when you see a divergence of this sort right now, commodities over this time period down 10.2% over the course of the trade war, stocks up about 12% over the course of the trade war, you have to wonder how it will come back together. So to talk more about this, I'd like to bring in Joe Perry of ForexAnalytix.
Hi, Abigail.
Hi, Joe. So what do you think about that divergence? And then you also have a divergence between gold and silver.
Yeah, I think that divergence is going to continue until the trade war is settled, or at least there's more indications of it being settled. But jumping into gold and silver, which is what I want to talk about today, there's also a divergence there that I'm
you have a pretty interesting chart here. I'd love for you to explain this well.
Sure. So on the top, you can see gold. We actually have, right up here, we have a rising wedge, which is not marked here, but the retracement of the rising wedge comes all the way back to that horizontal line, which comes into horizontal support right here. Out of there, we also have a flag pattern, which you can see is coming down right here, flagging. That targets that area as well. Also, this looks like it could be a head and shoulders pattern moving into those three, which makes me think that we're going to go a little bit lower, targeting this support level right here, which is right around 1440.
1440. Okay, so that's gold. So you think gold's going lower, but you think silver is going higher. Typically, these precious metals trade together.
Right. So taking a look at silver, we were in this rising channel, but look what happened right here. We had this burst out, blow off top, a huge volume rising. The next day, reverse came right back into the channel. Usually, when you test the top of the channel, you reverse, come off, test the bottom of the channel, and that's what we did here. We pulled back to the 38.2 retracement level of this entire move. We stopped right there. So now I'm looking for it to hold right there and then shoot higher.
So the technicals on both of these charts look similar enough to me to think that they would go in the same way, but you have a supporting chart here, which is the gold-silver ratio.
Right. Well, on that last chart we were looking at silver actually pull back 8%, where gold only pull back 4%. So I'm looking for gold to play a little catch-up. But take a look here. This is the gold-silver ratio, and you can see that this here is actually looks like a corrective move, in my opinion. Coming off here, this is actually A, B, and this here I would think would be C, D. And actually, if we've seen doing S&Ps before on the show, that when you get an AB and then you see a C, typically you look for the distance from A to B and connect it. Here we got to it down here. It actually had a false breakout, bounced back up. We're up here at the 50-day moving average resistance. I'm looking for a little rollover. And in order for it to roll over, a couple of things could happen. Either gold could go lower faster than silver, silver could go higher faster than gold, or they can move in opposite directions for the short term, which I think is going to be the case here.
Over the next couple of weeks?
Yes.
Great.
Next couple
so that does not help the bigger divergence, but two different interesting divergences.
No, long term, I think they're both going to move higher.